Hi, everybody. My name's Dave Krosky. I'm an archaeologist for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. That's me right there, just in case you wanted to put a face to my voice. And today I'm going to briefly discuss a few important concepts in archaeology: stratigraphy, context, and association. Let's look at this example, but first let's take a second to enjoy my stunning artwork. Anyway, let's say you're in an area where layers of sediment have been deposited over a long period of time, like a floodplain. If we dug a square hole into the ground and then stood inside that hole to look at the cross-section or profile, we'd see all these different layers. Each layer is called a stratum, and collectively they're called strata, hence the word stratigraphy, which is the term archaeologists use when studying or describing these layers. So the idea is that at one time, the bottom layer was the ground surface, and maybe after a flood, a new layer was deposited, which then became the new ground surface. And then another one until we have today's ground surface. Stratigraphy relies on what we call the law of superposition, which is really just a fancy way of saying that the bottom layer is the oldest, since it was laid down first, and the top layer is the youngest. So let's imagine that ancient people lived in this area while these layers were being deposited. And maybe they dug holes in the ground for things like fire pits and trash pits. These would be examples of what archaeologists call features. They'd look something like this in profile. We'll label them feature A and feature B. And based on the law of superposition, we know that feature B is older than feature A. And maybe they left behind artifacts like these stone tools. Notice that they were made into different shapes. We'll say that the one in feature A is a stemmed point, and the one in feature B is a lanceolate point. Also notice that each point is in a separate feature and in a separate layer. In other words, they have context. Imagine they also left behind evidence of what they ate, like deer bone and shell. You could see that the deer bone is associated with the stemmed point, and the shell is associated with the lanceolate point, and that's where the term association comes in. So now, with everything we see here, we could make some statements about the ancient people who lived here and what they did to survive. For example, we could say that the people who made lanceolate points and ate shellfish came before the people who made stemmed points and ate deer. And we could apply what we learned here to artifacts that we find in the future. For example, the next time we found a stemmed point, we would already know some things about the people who left it behind. So all of these concepts together form much of the basis for what archaeology is all about. Here in North America, prehistoric Native Americans were here many, many thousands of years before Europeans arrived, and we still have a lot to learn about them. Since they didn't have a form of writing like we're familiar with today, and therefore didn't record their events or the way that they lived, almost everything that we know about them is from what they left behind in the ground. What's more is that many materials like wood and cloth decay over time. So basically, we still have much of the human story to learn, very little evidence to learn from, and what little evidence we do have is very sensitive and depends heavily on having intact stratigraphy, context, and association. Okay, so let's say a bulldozer or a plow comes in and just kind of jumbles everything up. And maybe somebody came by and took the stone tools. And it all happened before an archaeologist was able to come out and take a look at everything. Is there any way we'd be able to make the same statements we made before? Of course not. And once artifacts are moved from their original context, that information is gone forever. That is, it's a non-renewable resource. So you can imagine that whenever artifacts are moved or taken, an archaeologist simply can't learn as much about the people who left them there. So if you ever come across an artifact, it's best to leave it be and call a professional, like the Texas Historical Commission, or if you're on public property like a park, to contact park staff, so that they could call in an archaeologist to come check it out. Archaeologists use highly specialized, tedious techniques that allow them to learn as much about the human story as possible, which in turn allows them to share that story with everyone. So there you have it. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of stratigraphy, context, and association, and why they're so important in archaeology. Thank you for watching.